For most people, the name Sun Tzu is associated with battlefields, generals, and strategy quotes shared by entrepreneurs who have never actually read his book. He's presented as a philosopher of victory, almost like a mysterious sage who cracked the psychology of conflict. But that narrative completely misses the point. Because when you strip away the slogans, the myths, and the romantic storytelling, something far more interesting emerges. Sun Tzu was not obsessed with winning wars. He was obsessed with not fighting them. He wasn't interested in glory, discipline, or domination. He was interested in cost. And in a world that was slowly destroying itself through constant warfare, Sun Tzu was the first to say an uncomfortable truth out loud. The greatest danger to a state is not the enemy in front of it. It's the bill that comes after the war. People think the art of war is about fighting. In reality, the book is about finance. This is finance and history, where money, power, and history intersect, and nothing is as easy as it looks. To understand Sun Tzu's financial genius, we first have to understand the time he lived in, because his ideas didn't emerge out of nowhere. They were born in a world collapsing under the weight of its own ambition. The 6th and 5th centuries BCE, the spring and autumn period, followed by the Warring States era. China was filled with fragmented, hostile kingdoms. Each one believed it could unify the world, and each one was burning its treasury to try. War had become constant. Armies were growing. The honorable chariot duels of aristocrats were gone. In their place were massive infantry armies. And those armies meant grain, iron, logistics, taxes, craftsmen, cooks, blacksmiths, and porters. War was no longer about heroism. It was an economic stress test. When a king sent an army into the field, he was borrowing from his own future, and more often than not, that debt came due. In the West, ancient wars are imagined through tactics and heroism, but in that era, war was logistics before it was anything else. The moment an army moved, the meter started running. A campaign lasting months could bankrupt a small state. A campaign lasting a year could collapse a large one. Everyone knew this. And yet, they kept fighting. It was an arms race long before the modern world had a name for it, and it pushed the entire system to the breaking point. This is the world Sun Tzu stepped into, not as a quiet philosopher lost in thought, but as an economic crisis solver wearing a military uniform. Today, we portray him as a sage inspiring CEOs. But in reality, he was a risk manager. He saw the numbers, the costs, the timelines, the logistics, and he realized something critical. Victory means nothing if the treasury collapses. Other rulers believed the enemy's army was the greatest threat. Sun Tzu believed the greatest threat was their own spending. That's why the most important sentence in The Art of War appears right at the beginning. War is of vital importance to the state. Vital, not glorious, dangerous, disruptive, capable of destroying the society it claims to defend. The rest of the book explains how to keep war cheap. The greatest victory is the one won without fighting. That's not mysticism, that's cost avoidance. No state has ever benefited from prolonged warfare. That's not poetic. That's a raw financial truth. Sun Tzu wasn't trying to win wars. He was trying to stop states from going bankrupt while winning them. When you read the book through an economic lens, it stops sounding like poetry and starts sounding like an Excel spreadsheet. He lists 5 fundamental factors: moral unity, heaven, earth, the commander, and discipline. These aren't mystical categories, they're cost variables. How resilient is the state? How stable are the people? How efficient is the logistics system? This is a risk analysis written thousands of years ago. Sun Tzu's obsession with logistics wasn't accidental. He says that when an army moves 20 kilometers from home, you lose the value of 100 measures of grain. Distance equals cost. Time equals compounded cost. He even advises using the enemy's resources, not because it's clever tactically, but because it's economically necessary. His emphasis on intelligence comes from the same logic. One spy can stop an army marching in the wrong direction. One piece of information can save millions. For Sun Tzu, information is the cheapest and most effective weapon. Bad information equals bad capital allocation. Even his focus on speed is economic. Speed lowers cost. Every day an army waits, money burns. A delayed victory is burned capital. Sun Tzu was not against war. He was against waste. To him, the greatest waste was fighting a war you never needed to fight. And historically, the states that listened to this logic survived longer. The ones that didn't burned their treasuries for honor and power. Sun Tzu didn't write theory. He wrote observed reality. And here's the uncomfortable part. These warnings have been repeated again and again over the last 200 years. Vietnam, Afghanistan, World War I. These wars weren't lost because soldiers were weak. They were lost because the economic model collapsed. Cyber warfare, sanctions, proxy wars. All of them follow Sun Tzu's logic: maximum impact, minimum cost. Sun Tzu's real message is this: states don't collapse because they lose wars. They collapse because they can't afford them. The best war is the one that doesn't require repairing your economy afterward. The Art of War is not a book about courage. It's a book about frugality. Not a book about victory. A book about stability. Not the philosophy of a warrior, but the philosophy of a steward. What Sun Tzu says is simple, uncomfortable, and timeless. Power is not measured by how hard you strike, but by how much striking you can afford. History is not won by the bravest states, but by the most economically disciplined ones. If this perspective was new to you, subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Because history teaches lessons far more expensive than most people realize.